The first thing I'm working on is the base color for Godzilla. So I'm doing him a darker gray. Okay, so I've got my gray mixed up for his skin. I've got my yellow, white, and white translucent mixed up for his claws. I had some white mixed with some pearl left over from another project, so I'm going to use that for his eyes. I might have something else in there that's a little more sparkly than the pearl, and just plain old black for the pupils. So the next step I want to do is make his base out of foil. All right, this looks like a good head body combination. Now I need to make his tail. All right, I got some 16 gauge 16 gauge wire that I got at the hardware store, and I'm using that. I'm not doing a whole wire armature. I'm gonna do the arms and legs and connect the tail with this, hopefully. Running the needle tool through there first usually creates a path that's easier for my wire to follow. There, looks just like him. Arrgh. So whenever I do a project, it's, you almost always have leftover scrap clay. So I'm going to use this for a base layer on Godzilla. So the first thing I need to do is just soften it up some. I'm not worried about it mixing it. I want it fairly thin because I still want to be able to, add my layer of the gray clay and have it be thick enough that I can add pieces to it. I've got a good start on him. I'm going to finish covering it with my scrap clay. I'm gonna go ahead and do the eye sockets for him. All right, I think this will work. He's ready to bake, so I'm setting him aside. I'm gonna wash my hands because they're kind of dirty. I don't know how well that shows up, but when I'm doing his eyeballs and his teeth especially, I don't want any of this to rub off on the lighter colors. I've got everything cleaned up. I'm just having him here for, to figure out proportions. We'll start with little claws. When I'm doing these, I'm just rolling them out into like a little spike, and then I just give them a little bit of a curve. Not much, don't want to overdo it. Now I want to make him a little fang. So one of the things I've done on a lot of my monsters is I give him a little tooth or a couple teeth. Got this idea from Chris Reiniak's creations, especially a lot of his older ones. I want all of my mini movie monsters, which is what this guy's the first of that line, to have some kind of tooth. Now I'm going to make the eyeballs and the dorsal plate. So the eyeballs, I'm using this, looks like a white glitter and white mixture that I had for a different sculpt. The only thing I want to do with the eyeballs is make sure they fit into those sockets. Definitely want the eyes to be cartoony in nature. Now for the dorsal plates, I am going to make them out of black clay, and then I'm going to add some paint detail when he is all done. Now, I won't necessarily use all these dorsal plates, but it's better to have extra than not enough. I've got all the dorsal plates made, the eyeballs, the claws, the tooth, more claws. Godzilla is ready for his initial baking. We're going to go ahead and bake all of this according to package instructions. All right, so I've got him all baked. I'm really happy with the shape of him, and now I'm going to start adding the gray clay over it. So I've got my gray clay here. Now, normally I would use like a clay adhesive if I was just like adding this piece, but since I'm going to add it all over, I think it's going to be fine. I do have some clay adhesive to use when I do the spikes, but I think this will work okay. So I've got his lower half all covered. I'm going to do some like creases and then do the skin texture. So I'm going to start in and add little creases around his thighs, little lines here. Now, since I didn't do the top of the tail, I'll need to match those lines up when I go in to do that. And I am going to do the underside, even though they're going to get flattened a little bit, but that's okay. And his tail is, I did it turned. One, I think it's more interesting, and two, it takes up less space. So by doing that, you're going to have your segments a little closer on the curved in part. Now, the trial and error of making a texture on him. And you can see what I'm doing there, and I really think that might be what I'm gonna shoot for. Sometimes when I texture something, I try it and I don't like it, so you smooth it out and texture it again. But I'm pretty happy with my first attempt on this. Now what I want to do is add, I'm gonna get 6 little balls of clay for the toesies. So this ball tool will work nicely for doing the openings for his claws. Okay, this is Sculpey Oven Bake Adhesive. So I'm just gonna put a drop in each opening. Man, those are some talons, huh? Those might be overdoing it, but I kind of like them like that. I was like, maybe I should cut them. I'm like, no. Okay, so I am going a little shorter. I'm gonna just push them in though. I'm not gonna trim them. I do like the longer claws, just not quite that long. All right, now to finish texturing, and then I'll bake it again according to package instructions. Okay, so I've got the lower half of my Godzilla all sculpted and baked. It's cooled down. It's actually cooled down for a week. Well, not quite, almost a week. So why is that? So I like to over-explain things. I'll try to keep it as short as I can, but I originally thought I could do this project in one day, like a whole day. I have Sundays off. I can get this all done on a Sunday. So one of my hobbies, in case you're curious, is I like to set unrealistic expectations for how long it takes me to do a project that I've never done before. Yep, I've been doing it for years. I can't break the habit. I just like, yep, I can get this done in a day. Well, I couldn't. And in the middle of the week, I got a really bad cold. So I am still recovering from that cold. So if I sound a little bit off, you know, from a minute ago in the video, that is why. So I'm going to go ahead and do from the neck down the same way I did the legs. I'm going to cover it, texture it, and bake it. But in the back, I need to do his dorsal plates. So since this has been sitting for a week, I'm just going to soften it up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead, just to be safe, put some clay adhesive on this. I am going to blend it around into the other clay that's on there. So this shouldn't really be necessary, but it's not going to hurt. I hope not. I don't know how it could. So sticky. I will probably go a little thicker on the back because I want to have enough clay there that I can push those dorsal plates into. One thing I'll have to do is, because his head's turned, I'm going to have to kind of have the dorsal plates turn with it. All right, I'm going to keep covering this with the gray clay, and then I'll add the texture. So I have him all covered with clay from the neck down, and I did bulk it up here on the back where I'm going to put the dorsal plates. And you can see I added a twist to it to go with the head movement. I also added this kind of front raise edge. It's a front spine? I don't know. So my favorite Godzilla is this one from the early 70s. And he's got kind of a front like seam there. And I don't know if that's just, you know, like if that was out of by design or if that's how his costume just was, you know, as a guy in a big rubber suit. And so I don't know if there was some technical reason why I needed to have that or if that's just how they designed it, but I wanted to incorporate that into my Godzilla. Now I'm going to go through and texture it and hopefully do it about the same as I did a week ago. I'm wondering if I could do a slight indentation and then I can use a ball tool to go a little bit deeper with it. I want to get these in as deep in the clay as I can, so hopefully they don't fall out. What's the goal on my sculptures? I have two goals. Have them look like somewhat how I envisioned when I thought of doing them and have them not fall apart. Have a little bit of the clay adhesive in there. And this is the ball tool I use for texturing, so I'm going to use that to kind of push the clay in. I don't want to use my finger and then smush all that texture down, but if I use this, it's like retexturing it as I push it together. All right, I'm going to do the whole thing with the rest of the middle row, the two side rows. Go ahead and finish up his dorsal plates. Hopefully everything survives the baking process and I can move on to doing the head and the hands. I'm like so excited to sculpt the head. I'm just, Now that these are all done, I'm going to go ahead and bake them again according to package instructions. And this is just, you know, my way of saving my progress. Now let's get going on the head. I should not need clay adhesive on these at all because I'm going to build some clay up around them, but I'm going to put a little bit in there. A little dab will do you, if I can even get them to go in. He's going to look all wonky, isn't he? Oh, look, that's not the direction I want him looking. Okay, so these could have obviously changed shape or I didn't have it quite perfectly cleaned out. I should have probably done this before I put the clay adhesive in there, but that's okay. Give him a little bit of eye surgery. So since it was a week since or about a week since I filmed the intro, not the intro, I filmed the first segment. I don't remember if I mentioned, but I am going to have something in his right hand. That's why it's outstretched and I want him looking at it, at least the best I can. I'm going to get him looking a little bit down and to his right, maybe. Come on, Zilla. Now, whenever I have a custom color where I, made this gray myself, I always want to make sure I've got enough because if I'm not using a recipe, which I should do more often, it's going to be really hard to match. So I am going to start applying it to Godzilla's head. Now that I have the head completely covered, I'm going to go ahead and add some details to it before I texture it. So as you can see, I made the eyes a little bit angry. And I want to add some nostrils and some tiny ears. Yeah, when doing sculptures, especially in a method where, I had this beginning armature covered with clay, it's like you really have to be able to visualize things in layers and in steps to know that you're like, okay, I know I can get to the results I want by going this way, even though this might not look like anything other than the basic pose. It doesn't even come close to my end image. So I mentioned I'm gonna have something in his right hand. Here's what it is. So I've got a bunch of micro machines. I thought it would be fun to incorporate these in my giant mini movie monsters. So I thought, hey, I'll have Godzilla holding something. And then I found this one. It's got a little window on the top that you can look through, and it says Dog Catcher City Pound. And then it clicked, okay, that'd be kind of fun because it's like, instead of catching a dog, it's trying to catch a giant monster. But then I thought, no, I don't want to waste that on Godzilla. And you're like, what? Waste it on Godzilla? Like, Godzilla's king of the monsters. How's that wasting on Godzilla? I've got a better choice for this one. So we're going to set this one aside. So then I was just going through, and I think I'm just going to, I want to pick one of the regular vehicles. So I like this little vehicle here. Maybe somebody could tell me in the comments what it is. I don't recognize it, but it looks familiar. They're a little bit, I don't want to say cartoony, but I don't know how else to say it. They're not realistic, but that works with my type of sculpture, so I thought that's perfect. I can have him holding this, picking it up. I was originally going to have him looking in the windows, but I don't think it's going to line up quite right. But we're going to set this aside because I want to make sure it'll fit in the hand, and then we're going to sculpt our two hands. Yes, Godzilla has two hands. He's not Goro, it's Godzilla. But I'm going to make them each off sculpture, and that'll be easier, and then I can attach them. And hopefully they stay on. I really should have had the wire go out farther. But I can make a little notch in there and use the clay adhesive, and hopefully they don't fall off during baking. If they do, I'll remake them. I have plenty of clay left, if they're not fixable, that is. If you have ideas for some movie monsters that you want me to make, be sure to leave it in the comments. I have several ideas already, so I'm good for the next few videos, but I definitely want to see what other people want me to make. And, you might say something like, what? I never thought about that. Saving the best for last, hands. I don't know how tall this guy was. Originally, I was thinking my kaiju size ones would be 6 inches, and my human size ones would be 4. Yeah, he's about between 5 1/4 and a 5 1/2 with his spikes. So maybe human size ones 3. I don't want them to scale. I just want them to be smaller, like significantly. I just think that'll look good on the shelf. So this is his left hand. I know left from right, I do. It just took me a second. I'm like, what side I'm looking at his right? Okay, this is just gonna be kind of a relaxed hand hanging out. I'm not gonna texture it till it's on there, but I've got to put the claws. Arrgh. Visuals. Remember, I made extras of these in case I needed different sizes. Or there's a chance I'll lose something too. They're pretty tiny. This, I'm definitely gonna have to use clay adhesive, and then I'm gonna take some clay around the wrist. If I do the clay around the wrist, I could blend it in to the already baked arm as well as the unbaked hand. All right, I think you get the general idea, so I'm gonna go ahead and continue on, finish up this hand, add the texture just like I did everything else. Do the other hand outstretched to make sure the car kind of sits in it. And then I'll bake it one last time according to package instructions. He survived the baking process. The little car here, I think that works out really nicely. He's like, huh? Want it to be like, he could be trying to look in the car. A few things I want to do. I want to dry brush his spikes, aka dorsal plates. I've got this folk art acrylic paint, some metallic acrylic paint, gunmetal. Just gonna load up the brush. Just get the excess off there. Not looking to cover these, I just wanna give them a little sparkle. If I do another Godzilla, come on, some year. When I do another Godzilla, I might put a lot more texture in the plates so it's more extreme, I guess, with the dry brushing. While I'm finishing up this guy, I did want to mention to you that if you are a Godzilla fan like I am, I did curate a list of fun Godzilla items I found on Amazon and put the affiliate links down in the description box below. So now I just want to water down black. I don't have a scientific method for this. I just put some in. Let's see how disastrous this is. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking that watered down black, covering my sculpture, and then wiping it off. And it'll darken up the gray, and that's okay. But it also goes into our crevices. But that should work, so we're gonna go ahead and do all of him with a black wash, and then we'll go on to the next step. All right, I've got the wash all done. Didn't turn out exactly how I wanted. I was hoping for more of it going into the indentions I did, but it's really kind of patchy. But I think it's gonna work. I just need to let it completely dry a bit. Shouldn't take too long. I'm gonna go ahead and clean up my mess. You can see I spilled some of my wash there off camera, but you know, it happens. Get these in here. So I'm gonna get this cleaned up, and then I think I'm gonna do a little bit of dry brushing on white on the spines, and then maybe a little bit to highlight some areas on his body. I'm not for sure yet how to do that. I feel like this guy is definitely a fake it till you make it type guy, and I've got this mess. So I'm gonna go clean these up. I'm gonna go wash my hands. Just load up my brush. Get my excess off. This one I'm definitely not worried about going over every single spine on it or plate. You have a little bit of white highlights to them. Last night, before I went to bed, I found Godzilla versus Megalon on YouTube, and I watched about an hour of it before I started falling asleep in my chair. So I know it's not one of the most popular Godzilla movies, but I'm curious, like, what are your favorite Godzilla movies? It's Godzilla vs. Megalon's one of my favorite, but it's because that's what I saw. I saw it when I was a kid, and the Godzilla movies I remember as a kid being kind of in rotation on TV, and I don't remember, you know, might have been a couple times a year, maybe once every other year, I don't know. But it was Godzilla vs. Megalon, Godzilla vs. Gigan, and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. And I always thought it was kind of weird, you know, like those three, but it's probably whoever had the rights to them. I remember at Walgreens, I picked up a Godzilla vs. Megalon VHS tape. So it definitely had more distribution during that time, even though a lot of people don't consider it one of the better Godzilla movies. But like I said, I liked it. It's it's my childhood. But a lot of people like Godzilla 85, and I know it kind of depends on when they watched it. And I think it's a fine movie. It's also Return of Godzilla in Japan. I think the movie's fine. I don't, other than the first one, you know, first Godzilla movie, I really not a fan of Godzilla movies if they don't have other monsters. My whole thing is, he's king of the monsters. Shouldn't there be monsters for him to, you know, show his dominance? I mean, just my thoughts. I have no issues with what people like. I'm not one of them guys. I even enjoyed the 1998 movie. Tell me he didn't say that. Yeah, I do. Part of it is because it's just I think it's a fun monster movie. I don't like, you know, I'm an adult. I'm aware it's not a traditional Japanese movie, and it doesn't capture a lot of the essence of the Godzilla movies, in my opinion. And I was really like bummed that they couldn't give him his atomic breath. I'm like, what? But I think he looks cool for a giant monster. I like the human characters. I like the actors in it, and it gave us a really awesome cartoon. So if you've seen the 98 movie and thought it was, it's all right, or you didn't even like it, give Godzilla the series cartoon a chance, because it's way better. Ooh, that's got too much. I'm kind of in a weird obsession of keeping working on this thing. Like, I can make it better. There's not an end. I do want to put, you know, more time into some of my sculptures, but there's a limit, people. Remember when I said I wasn't going to try to go over all these? I might have been lying to myself. Kind of just look at it, I'm like, oh, it looks better visually here. I like the contrast of the white against now the darker gray, but also, like I said, I want to, and I like you can see some of the silver underneath it, at least on some of them. Doing some dry brushing on Godzilla himself might bring that out. See, I love that. I'm gonna do that, I think, all over. I was gonna do just maybe dry brush part of it, but I love the look of that too much. I'm kind of addicted to dry brushing. Is that a thing? Holy cow. I hope people realize I am not, I know if this is your first video here, it's like, well, just subscribe for sure. But I'm not like, I'm the best artist in the world. It's more like I'm in shock when I do something I'm happy with. It's like, oh, I made that. That was impressive. Yeah, I'm definitely happier with that. I think it's what I was going for. I was thinking about doing green, but I like the white. It kind of goes with the transition of the gray and then with the black wash in some of the darker areas. So you have all those neutrals in there. And depending on how much is on my brush, it's going to vary from area to area, which I actually think's good because he's a big monster. He's not like a barn, somebody painted red, and the color has to be consistent throughout. Holy cow, I am happy with that though. Oh, see, you got a lot of white there. And if you want to go even lighter, but not, but still do the dry brushing, you can go over the areas you've already did with the same amount of, roughly the same amount of paint loaded on your brush. And that way it won't seep into those crevices. And there's areas, like if I want a little bit lighter on his knees or something, you want some areas to show differently. Yeah, but I love doing texture and I love doing paint that shows off that texture. And this kind of dry brushing definitely does that. I just think it makes things visually way more interesting. All right, well, I think we get the gist of this, so I'm gonna finish this up and we'll jump to the final section. Now, there's actually two things I need to do before I do the final reveal. It's not really a reveal, you can see me as I'm making it. So I love how the dry brushing brings out the detail, but this guy is way too light, it's too white. It's like the snow Godzilla. I'm gonna try to fix this. Couple different things in mind here, but I'm gonna mix up some black with some green, and I actually have this crystal green. It's a metallic, and that might be another mistake too. But at this point, like, what the heck? Might as well try it. It's one of those, is the whole thing gonna be a happy accident? I feel like it could be. All right, so there's my black-green mixture, and it's okay if it looks mostly black. I'm just hoping it has like a tint of green, because I don't necessarily want to do a green Godzilla like I've done in the past. I don't even know if you can tell the green's in there. All right, let's give this a shot. You can see a little bit of a sparkly in it. Definitely don't want to have it too thick. I don't want to just be painting this thing all dark. That definitely dims it down. This might work. Definitely doesn't make the texture pop as much, but I think that's okay. I mean, I do love it how the texture popped, but also might be a more natural transition on that. All right, well, I think you get the gist of this, so let me finish up this and then we'll take a look at him and see if I'm finally happy with him. All right, I think I am happy with that. That looks a lot better than the white. I'm disappointed I couldn't use the white with how much texture it was showing. I thought that was pretty awesome, but it is what it is. I'm also glad I kind of learned this now because I want to do Hedorah later, and that monstrosity is, pretty much all black. And I want to dry brush something on it, so I might come up with like a black and a purple mixed together to let the detail show in that one. So my next step is to do the UV resin. Put a little bit on this cup here. Then I have my UV resin brush. Might need to switch this brush out. It was staying pretty clean, like the resin wasn't setting up on it, and I don't wash it out. I just kind of take a paper towel and clean it off. It's definitely become more rigid. Get both the eyes done. Now, if you don't have UV resin or you don't want to use UV resin, you can just use Sculpt gloss coat. They have several different kinds. I just like the way the UV resin looks, and I had a lot left over from my Pac-Man project. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and finish up. I'm gonna do the tooth and all his claws this way. This will take a little bit because you have to hold the light on it for a bit. Now that the UV resin is all done, I'm gonna go ahead and glue the car onto place. All done. Now let's take a look at the finished sculpt. Overall, I'm really happy how this guy turned out. He was definitely a challenge, and I'm thinking I'm gonna do something a little bit easier next time. I like to mix it up. Most likely, whatever I pick, I'll make it way more complicated than it needs to be because that's what I seem to do. But, at least I recognize that. All right, I would love to hear what you guys think of this guy. I would also love to hear ideas for more monsters you want me to create, so be sure to leave those in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching my first mini movie monster video starring Godzilla. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. Also, make sure to ring that little notification bell It helps you get notified whenever I post a new video. Be sure to check out the Godzilla I made out of Warbler. This video is from about 4 years ago. It might just be a little bit different than what I'm currently doing. Not completely, but you know. I still love Godzilla back then. I mean, mainly because I've loved Godzilla since I think I was like 6 or 7, and that was a few decades ago. And remember, never stop creating. Bye.